Hi everybody, happy Saturday, welcome. My name is Nathan Goheen, thank you for tuning in, and as always, if you got any questions or comments or anything, drop them in the chat, and hopefully I will see them. So, this week there was something I read that caught my attention. It's by Mark Rothko, and I'll just go ahead and jump right in. It's kind of a long quote, so bear with me. Mark Rothko said, "It must be noted that the great painters of the figure had this in common. Their portraits resemble each other far more than they recall the peculiarities of a particular model. In a sense, they have painted one character in all their work. This is equally true of Rembrandt, the Greeks, or Modigliani, to pick someone closer to our own time. The Romans, on the other hand, whose portraits are facsimiles of appearances, never approached art at all. What is indicated here is that What is indicated here is that the artist's real model is an ideal which embraces all of human drama rather than the appearance of a particular individual." So there's a lot there, and sometimes Mark Rothko is tough for me to digest. But there are three really interesting points that I want to kind of talk about right quick. And I'm going to jump to the middle of the quote, which says that the Romans made portraits, facsimiles of appearance, and they didn't approach art at all. I thought that was an interesting thing to say, that, you know, if you've got a bust of Julius Caesar, right? And it's a facsimile of him, doesn't look like him at all, that's not artistic. Or that's not art. He said it's not art. And whether it is art or whether it's not art, I think it is artistic. And it's interesting because until, photography was invented, people would paint trying to make a portrait of someone and be like, hey, this is what you look like, for posterity, I guess, for the future. So when cameras came around, that kind of mindset received some new attention. Maybe we don't need to paint things exactly as they are, right? And then it got me thinking, well, is a picture a piece of art? And it's like, I don't know. Is it? It can be artistic, but is it a piece of art? And I kind of concluded that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what word I ascribe to it. Some pictures look good, some pictures don't. Some pictures I like, some pictures I don't. But I just thought it was interesting that Rothko would say that something is not art. So then I was like, okay, so what does he mean by that? Maybe he means that there's no humanity inserted into the project. And this kind of leads into the artist's real model, be it a physical person, in this case, which he's talking about, or just kind of like a model for, whatever art you may be creating, embraces all of human drama. It embraces all of humanity, right? All of our emotions. Rather than, and then he starts talking about the specific to painting again. And I was like, okay, that I can relate to. The idea of wanting to put all of oneself into their work. And this is kind of an interesting thing for me to think about, because if you're like, okay, I need to put all of myself into a piece of work, that piece of work is probably going to need to be expansive. It's either going to need to be a long piece of work, or it's going to need to be a large piece of work. Probably can't be like tiny. Can't be only 2 or 3 minutes. Unless you have a series of miniature pieces of work. And so together they form something larger. Or if throughout your lifetime you go through phases, like Picasso had his blue phase, right? Like that's a very distinct phase. If an artist is in a very distinct phase and then they make a clear switch to another distinct phase and then they move to another distinct phase, that's another way to include everything into your art. So there's different approaches to think about when you're like, how can I reach a lot of people? How can I reach a large audience, a diverse audience? And with music, it's kind of interesting. I think like albums, a collection of songs, you can kind of start to approach that. And great albums have that flow. You can hear it. I was listening to Stevie Wonder's Fulfillingness's first finale, I think is all the words in that album, and it's got a seriously great flow to it. It's not all one feeling. He'll give you a feeling, then he'll switch up to another feeling, then he'll switch up to another feeling, then he'll switch up to another feeling. And I think that that's a really cool format, like an album format, like 40 minutes to 60 minutes maybe. That's like a good attention span. When I go to a museum, I don't look at a painting for that amount of time. I guess maybe if there was paintings in a series, it would be easier to do that. Coincidentally enough, Rothko has this place I want to visit down in I think it's in Texas. It's called like the Rothko Chapel. Could maybe spend 40 or 60 minutes there. That'd probably be about perfect. But the time frame of an album, I think, is very geared towards, or coincidentally geared towards, our attention span, right? Think about when you were in high school. Classes are about 40 to 60 minutes long. That's about how long you can pay attention for before your mind starts to go, or maybe before my mind starts to go. So trying to recognize your limitations when you're fitting your emotions into your work. Do I have a 3-minute time limitation? Maybe I can only fit one emotion into that. Do I have a 2x2, 2-inch by 2-inch easel? Maybe I can only fit one emotion into that. And adjusting your approach to what you're creating based on the size of your canvas, the size of your the length of your time. It's interesting stuff. I don't know. I like thinking about this stuff. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to say, but I can't remember if I can come up with it right now. This is kind of just a little, I remember now. So, at the very beginning of this quote, I'm going to jump back to the beginning. Talked about the second part, talked about the third part, and now I'm going to talk about the first part. At the very beginning of it, it must be noted that the great painters of the figure had this in common. Their portraits resemble each other far more than they recall the peculiarities of a particular model. So he's saying that the portraits of Rembrandt show his Rembrandts all look like the same painting, as opposed to if Rembrandt painted a model and then another Dutch master painted that model and then another Dutch master painted that model, you wouldn't be looking at the model. You'd be looking at the individual unique voice of that artist, be it Rembrandt or the Greeks, or he points out Modigliani, who was a portrait painter, so it fits very tightly in with this quote. I was kind of looking at the quote in a broader perspective. But one of the things I really like about Rothko, at first I didn't like him. I was just like, this is not for me, to put it nicely. I was not so nice at the time. But one of the things I really like about Mark Rothko is it's like you see it, you know it's his. His later period stuff, you know it's his. Once he made the switch, someone says Mark Rothko, you can picture what a Mark Rothko painting is. And when you see one, you know it's his. And if it's not his, it's someone that took his idea, took his style, whatever you want to call it. And I really like that. I think that shows an amazing amount of commitment and authenticity. And I really, really like that. So I like the fact that it's kind of like, I don't know how to say it any other way. Maybe like circling the drain, not in a morbid sense, but in the sense that like you're just getting closer and closer to your target. And every one that you do is a little bit closer. I like that. You know, I think that's a cool thing. So I feel like I babbled for a minute here, or 11. I hope you all thought that was kind of interesting, the quote at least, which I thought was really cool. I love quotes that make me think about, think. I love quotes that make me think about subjects that I'm interested in. Who doesn't? So check out the links in the show more. There's some music in there, and yeah. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their Saturday. Have a great rest of your weekend. And I'll see you next Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. All right. Bye-bye.